I love it. I love spontaneity. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to be with us. I'm your cruise host, Jason, and welcome to All Access Pass. Each and every single day, I get to interview another one of your icons, your favorite stars, the headliners of this cruise. And today, I'm going to put two absolute legends up here with us. They are celebrating 50 years together, which is no small feat. Jerry and Dewey, or as you know them, give it up for America. In the chair would be preferable, sir. Yeah, in either chair. I just said out loud, and I realized as I said it how cool it is. 50 years together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go figure.
I feel like bands can't make it 5 minutes most of the time. How do you do 50 years?
When we started doing officially the 50th year, a lot of people misinterpreted it and thought it was a farewell tour. And we said, no. No. We're just getting ready for the second 50. Yeah.
What do you attribute it to, though? I mean, what is it? Just you guys get along, you enjoy each other, or is just the money's that great that it doesn't matter? Yeah.
We certainly get along. Obviously, we've been together since high school, and we've been through the ups and downs through this whole journey with not just our career, our lives, our health, our families, our wives. So there's a lot that we have in common that way. But I'll tell you, that first 25 years seemed to go bing, and I don't know where the last 25 have gone. It's just like one day you wake up and there you are, right, folks?
And that's a testament, though, I mean, to the relationship.
And we treat it with great respect. I think fans who have followed us for more than a few years will know that we have always done our best to do a continually great show that not only is entertaining for everybody who comes.
Super great.
But for us, we don't want to find ourselves in a position where we're phoning it in and stuff.
Yeah.
It just would be inappropriate. So I think the whole thing has evolved in a beautifully organic way.
Well, we were just kind of chatting backstage, and we do, Star Vista Live, we do between 6 and 8 cruises a year, depending on the year and which charter we're doing. And some cruises are really about the music, meaning it's not as important that you have the actual band themselves. It's important that the music is being done the way that you want it done. And some cruises, like this one, it's very important that the actual group is here. And so even if you were to not sound the way you're supposed to, they'd still want to see you two do it.
Yeah.
Of course, they get the double bonus of not only seeing you, but you still sound absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See, the real problem is we don't have a tribute band yet who's out there. We were just out watching the Who generation, and that was great. You know, it was awesome.
We've played with the Who.
We have, yeah. That's true.
If we had brought some merch or a bit more merch, we have a shirt that says, "At least we're who we're pretending to be."
Don't you know who I think I am? Yeah. So take us back. We have some folks, I know we have a lot of diehard America fans out there, but take us back to the early days, 1970, back in London. Tell us a little bit about the early days and how you even came to be.
Well, some of you know that we did graduate from high school together in 1969 at a U.S. school in London, England. Our dads were Air Force, so we were raised in the Air Force all our lives. Moved around quite a bit, but we had a high school band. Jerry actually had the band that I kind of horned in on at some point, but our then third member, too, Dan Peake, the three of us all graduated together. So at that point, we're still in London, working at the base, doing some odd things. Jerry got into some sessions with some British guys, which was a great toe in the door. But the key was writing these songs. We'd been doing cover songs and top 40 stuff for teen club and high school things. So when that writing started, it just lit a fire under us. I think we we were writing this one song after another, and it was the three of us together. Different styles to some degree, but we love the vocal harmonies. We've been raised on the Beatles and, you know, the Everly Brothers and Beach Boys, of course. And so it just kept snowballing, and we had this bunch of songs, but we didn't really have an act per se. Three of us sitting on stools with acoustic guitars didn't have any money for anything much more expensive than that at that point. So at that point, you want to pick that up? Because we just made the right contacts.
It was a lot of good fortune at the right time. I had started to do a few sessions, kind of just shopping myself out because I played a variety of instruments well enough. And so I was doing a lot of demos. And one of the groups that I had sat in with had a manager that was connected. In London, there's quite an active music scene. All the major labels would have an office. There's Warner Brothers and CBS. Sure. And the manager of that group was shopping that tape around, and he listened, and he had to tell the guy, Dave House, and he says, I don't know. I don't hear. He says, what's that lead guitar? There's a lead guitar. And he honestly said to the guy, he said, well, that's actually an American kid who was sitting in and played us on a session. He said, he's got a band that he's got together. He says, well, bring me that band. So we actually got the interview from a demo from another group. So it's just a great example of you never know how and why it's going to happen.
Right
or when
place
it's
at
happen.
the right time
place,
is
right
really
time.
a truism.
Yeah, but don't undersell the fact that he obviously recognized something in the
was
kid playing guitar.
It was a heck of a solo, probably.
Clearly, yeah. You clearly shred that solo.
I guess so. I have no idea what the song was. I can't remember, but it's a nice anecdote.
And from there, where do you start playing? I mean, are you playing clubs? Are you playing on the bass? Are you playing at the high school?
Yeah, this fellow named Dave Housen that Jerry mentioned was in the music business. He had a small label called Middle Earth Records, and they were a subsidiary of Chess Records in the U.S., and so he had something going on, but not a lot. But he saw something in us. He got us on a couple of shows, small things. This place called the Country Club. Do you remember that Country Club deal? Sure. And some pub things. And a college. Was he part of the Imperial College?
That was
we used to say, you know the Royal Albert Hall? Well, we're playing right next door at the Imperial College.
Yeah. There was a lovely pub scene, a lot of live music going on on all different levels, even down to the very bass kind of just, 3 sets a night kind of thing. Groups like Brinsley Schwartz with Nick Lowe, for some fans that run a little bit deeper. It was a very creative time to be in London. But our period at that position in the business was very quick because we went and demoed for all the different recording labels, and Warner Brothers right away said, we'll sign you. And we did the first album. And
we went right into their office, remember? We played. Yeah, we actually walked in and played. It was unheard of in those days. Now you do demos and guys do fully produced things on their home computers, but we had to sit in an office and strum our guitars and sing songs.
We knew at that time, those of you familiar, we had Riverside and Sandman and I Need You, and we played them just acoustically to this guy, and he's still a dear friend, a man named Martin Wyatt, who went on to do many wonderful things in the business. But he said it was the hardest thing he ever had to do was sit there and pretend to be unimpressed as we played.
Knowing he's going to negotiate with you in a minute.
And he ran in, he was the vice president, and he said he ran into the next room where Ian Ralphini, the head of the label, was, and he says, you'll never guess what just walked in here, and got a contract, and within a month or so we were signed to Warner Brothers.
And how? I was just going to say, and then we made another contact with this guy named Jeff Dexter, who was a very colorful, flamboyant DJ compere guy around London, and he would introduce all the big acts on stage, kind of like you, Jason.
Yeah. Colorful, flamboyant,
and, all the huge acts. And, like he introduced Hendrix and everybody at the Isle of Wight.
Just like me,
Just like you. And he was well known, and he's the one who got us on some of these high-profile bills, like opening for The Who, like opening for Pink Floyd. We tell that story on stage. We suddenly found ourselves literally within, 9 months, 6 months of our having written these songs, made these contacts on stage with some of these artists that we were huge fans of ourselves, of course. I always think back again about this passage of time. We were like 18 or 19, and those bands, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and The Who, were all of like 28 or 27.
Old guys. Yeah, the old guys.
They were old guys, but when I think back, that's where all that energy was. They were super young, too. But that Jeff Dexter then also lived with a guy who worked at Warner's, Ian Samwell, right?
Sorry,
Ian Samwell worked over at Warner's, and he ended up co-producing that first album. We also had another ace in the hole at Warner Brothers in Derek Taylor, who was the Beatles publicist / he's kind of a guru with them, right? and he championed us over there and said we were the best band he'd heard since the Byrds and all this stuff, which didn't hurt. So we were really off and running again with all these key things that happened. Small community in London, small condensed thing with a lot of influence and power of the whole British music scene.
That's not a crazy story today with the popularity of social media and the ability to make a YouTube video that hits 100 million people overnight. But in the 70s, it's
a big deal.
That's kind of that's not very common.
The only thing that we like to add is that because we were young and naive and we had made this first record, I hope you can all imagine, you make a record and you're incredibly excited. We've done it, and you're going to put it out and hopefully you get on the radio. Well, all those things did happen, and so there was a certain level of, hey, cool, but everybody around us was in shock. They said, do you realize what's... Because, of course, we went to the States and it became the #1 album and single with a first release, which not even the Beatles had done. I mean, it was a pretty big deal. And I don't mean to imply that we weren't excited by it, but the impact...
It's hard to kind of realize it, right? Because when you envision it and it all happens, that this is what's supposed to
And it's a hard act to follow, your first album and single and #1. Who are these upstarts and these young guys, So we hadn't paid a lot of dues. We had... toured that first 9 months or so quite a bit up and down the M1, it's called. It's the main artery in London, colleges and pubs, and we'd gone to Holland. We'd done a short tour, staying in youth hostels and whatnot. And got
nothing but the best for you guys. Yeah.
Got put on a couple of good bills, big bills then. I always was proud that we ended up being put on the bill opening for the band in 1970 or early 71.
71, at the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam.
And the other key tour that we nailed down, not, again, fortunate, was Cat Stevens' European leg of his tour. So we got a lot more exposure there again. And it's something that I marvel at to this day. Then quickly,
please,
after the first album and single were happening, of course, the parent company, Warner Brothers in L.A., said, well, we're going to put this thing out, but you guys have to come over and tour and promote it. So we... absolutely. We hadn't been back to the States in 4 or 5 years. We were these American kids, kind of, lusting for home. And so they put together, about 5 cities?
Club tour,
opening for the Everly Brothers on the first 2 legs, which was a fantastic, I remember telling my dad, we're opening for the Everly Brothers, and he was very impressed. Oh, I guess these guys are doing something right. But
well, that's actually what I was just going to ask you. That literally is going to be my question. What are your parents saying when no, we're going to start a band, we're going to make it? Sure, son. And then all of a sudden, within this meteoric 6 to 9 month period, you do make it. What are your parents doing from the start of that 6 months to the end of that 6 months?
I remember my dad, who was very supportive from the start and to his dying day, just one of our biggest fans. But he, in all realistic kind of frame of mind, said to my older brother, he said, when you come over this summer, I'd like for you to have a talk with your younger brother, because I'm not sure about this music thing, it just seems a little shaky. And by the time my brother arrived in London, Horse with No Name was #1, and he said to my dad, what do you want me to tell him now?
Find a second one. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I love that story.
How about your parents doing?
Mine, my mother was very supportive. We were a musical family, not players. Nobody played or sang in our family, but they played a lot of eclectic music, so they appreciated music. I do remember when Horse with No Name, we'd already made the first album without that song, and then we'd been asked by Warner's, do you have any other stuff? And I Need You was the first song that was all slated to be the big first release. It seemed like a comfortable bet, almost a standard. It is kind of a standard, but they wanted some more stuff. And I do remember my mom, we played in Harrogate, Yorkshire, which is where I was born, actually, to my British mother. And after the show, she said, I do like that one about the horse. That one's good. So I figured, well, maybe
What's his name?
That's one.
That's one. I mean,
winning.
Winning. But they were always supportive. I don't think they really ever realized how big we had become and what was really going on. Pretty simple family we were. My dad's a sergeant in the Air Force. My mother was from a British family, and we'd moved around in the States to various bases, Biloxi, Mississippi, and Omaha, Nebraska, and Pensacola, Florida, and all over the place. My mother had never even been to the U.S. Until my dad brought her over. So I don't think they really comprehended how big this thing was. And then we won a Grammy for the Best New Artist, and it sunk in more. And,
Gee, you think?
I mean, for that matter, I never really. It took a while to catch up with his career.
Sure.
It really did.
We did, and as Dewey was alluding, we came over to the States to do this club tour. And the first week was opening for the Everlys at the Cellar Door in D.C., and we were booked for 30 minutes or so. Everly Brothers, unbelievable legends, as you all know, but in the band at that time, Waddy Wachtel on guitar, Warren Zevon was the piano player. It was an unbelievable thing. And there were lines around the block to see these three teenagers from England, because it said, "From England, America." And Horse was blowing up as the record of the year. So there were lines around the block. We would play our set, and unfortunately, the crowd would then all leave as the Everlys were playing. So for the second week, we were supposed to do the same thing outside of Boston in a place called Lenny's on the Turnpike. And Everlys mysteriously got ill between the end of the D.C. show and the start of Boston. And we got there, and Lenny said, "It's okay, the phones are ringing off the hook. Guys, it's going to be great." And we said, "Yeah, but we've only got like 30 minutes, 40 tops if we jam." And he said, "I got a kid out of college. He's a funny kid named Jay Leno. He's going to do some..." So we worked with Jay Leno in February of '72 at Lenny's on the Turnpike.
And he was funny. I got to say, he was so funny.
Just a funny kid out of college. That's all he is at that point. Well, if you guys remember last time we were here, I always like to open it up and allow the audience to write a few questions. And just in case you were curious, after 50 years, this is as many questions as I ever get for anybody when doing this. So I apologize to many of you. We're not going to get to all of them, but we will get through a few of these. Lee from Tennessee says, this is a great question. Are you sometimes or ever in awe that you've managed to sustain your success and popularity over the course of your 50 years?
Lee. Where are you, Lee?
Lee,
By
you
the
out
way,
there, raise a hand, Lee.
My real name is Lee. Dewey's a nickname, so Lee, I got to answer that one for you, yeah. Surprised about sustaining it? Totally. I mean, by all rights, after that big a splash at such an early age with not a whole lot of mileage under us, we shouldn't have be here after all this time. Because that sophomore jinx and all that, the second album and trying to follow it up. And then we did relocate back over to L.A., and we were in the deep end of the pool. We had to put together a live show that included bass and drums, a rhythm section. And so we had our hands, plus we were in, David Geffen was managing us by then. He brought us into his stable, which included Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Joni Mitchell, and Jackson Browne, and Ronstadt, and all these people that we looked up to, too. And they were still waiting for us to prove ourselves, I think. So to be here after 50 years, I'm super surprised, yes.
Loretta from Buffalo, New York. How many children do you gentlemen have? Any of them following in your footsteps in music?
I have 5 children. And I have 3 lovely kids from my Australian wife and 2 boys of my own. So our kids go from 16 to 40. My oldest, Matthew, toured for years as Katy Perry's lead guitarist and was nominated last year for 2 Grammys because he was the engineer on Camila Cabello's Havana, which was the most downloaded song in the history of...
Yay, Matt. Matt Beckley.
Not so bad.
Matt Beckley.
Did you think in the beginning, I don't know if music's for you, son.
You know what? I was a weekend father. I was divorced shortly after, and I would pick him up and drive him around, and I would be playing music and all the important, what I would consider the important music, and I would say, "Now listen to that hi-hat, son. You hear how it goes from 8th notes to 16th notes and stuff." And I heard him in an interview, and he said, "Yeah, Dad ruined music for me at an early age." Anyway.
What about you, Dewey?
I have 2 adult children. Well, I have 2 adult children by my first marriage and a stepdaughter with my second marriage, Destry, Dylan and Lauren for my first. And I have 3 grandchildren total. So I am, Jerry tells that story about the grandfathers last night. This funny story, we'll tell it later. But grandchildren are something I didn't really expect either, to be honest. A beautiful grandson and granddaughter. They're living outside Atlanta with my daughter and her husband. And then my grandson from my son is in Hawaii. My ex-wife relocated there, and my son followed her over there.
Are you a granddad, a grandpop, a grandpa?
Grandpa.
Grandpa.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. Everybody has a different...
Everyone has a different, yeah.
Yeah.
Your
In
grandpa.
England, they call grandmas nannies. You know, you
Nana.
call them
Yeah,
nanny.
Nana and nanny.
We
yeah.
have another definition for nanny, kind of. But I'm grandpa. And
Grandpa.
I'm proud to be, by the way.
I love calling him Grandpa on stage. Not that my wife and I aren't incredibly anxious for our own. We actually, my wife is Australian. We split our time. We live in Sydney, Australia, and we live in Venice, California. So we actually commute. Short hop.
Just a
We
short 14
love
hour.
Sally, but I remember saying, Jer, really? You can't find a girl like in New York or Florida? All the way over there, but she's beautiful. She's part of our team now, too, Sal.
Trish, who comes all the way from Liverpool, UK, traveled here to see you, ... Any plans to tour in the UK again?
Actually, we do have a couple shows on the
Trish, where are you,
books
by the way?
coming
You
up.
travel all the way here. We
Trish.
can acknowledge wherever you are. Trish, you're right over
Hi,
here on the
Trish.
edge.
Hi, Trish.
Yeah, in July, we've got a couple of shows. We're doing...
Shepherd's Bush on the 10th in London. We're playing at something called the Goodwood Festival of Speed on July 11th. And then we were at the Cornbury Music Festival on July 12th.
in Chichester.
In Chichester. So there are 3 shows.
Chichester.
coming up, Yeah.
And if you can't get us there, we're going over to Germany, too, for a few shows,
Yeah.
right?
And I think Paris,
Oh, yeah.
before that, Paris on the
2 in
7th.
France. Wow.
No. Although we would love to get to your city. We have played there, but not for many, many years. One of the things that people, no matter where you go, how come it's been so long since you were in Rochester or whatever? And you have to say, please understand, we don't pick where we play. Otherwise, we'd be playing Maui every month.
Except the cruise. Except the
Oh,
cruise.
there's
Always
this
want to
cruise,
get us
of
on
course.
that
Yeah,
cruise.
yeah.
You go where you're asked. So that's
Yeah,
the
that's
answer.
pretty much the way it
Jerry
works.
from Chicago, because actually this is a question I bet you've never heard. What's the inspiration for Horse with No Name?
The inspiration. At least you're not asking me what the name is.
Yeah. What's the name of the horse?
The inspiration. We actually have a horse. My wife and I adopted
This is a great story.
Mustang about 3 years ago from Reno up there, where they have this, where they do the roundups and they try and adopt out these. Well, we did it, and I'd never been around a horse. This is another thing. I was always kind of afraid of horses. I love all wildlife, and I mean that. I'm a reptile freak and fish, but horses were so big. And my brother and I, when we were kids, got into it with a horse once, and it bit my brother, and I said, okay, that's it for them.
Well, it's not advised to get into it with a horse, for the record.
Not a good idea.
Don't get into it with an animal that is 10 times your size. Yeah, it's probably ill-advised.
Anyway, I digress, but that's a great learning experience, and we love this horse. And her name is Nonami, by the way. I'm getting to the name, which is
Noname. Get it?
Noname. The girls came up with that. Where's my wife, Penny? But to answer your question, the inspiration was certainly about those travels in the Air Force. We moved around a lot, and my brother and I and sister, one of the common themes was always to explore the ecosystems and the environments we were in, and swamps and deserts and things. And the desert became one of my favorite places. The first time I saw cactuses, I thought, wow, this is the most exotic thing. And I loved it, the whole... the peace and quiet out there, and essentially living in England at the time that we were writing all of our songs and beginning the band, that I was conjuring up that imagery, and I really wanted to express what I thought and felt about the desert at the time. And of course, it helped me ward off a lot of the rain in England. It seemed those years that we lived there, it rained constantly.
Gary from Newport Beach and Sharon from Houston have the same question. Some others might be in there, but I didn't get to it yet. And that is there a story or what's the inspiration behind the song Daisy Jane? And Sharon from Houston wants you to know that she named one of her Dachshunds Daisy Jane. So,
Far out. Hey.
There is no actual literal Lady Daisy Jane, but I do have some details about it. I remember I wrote it. One of the things you do when you're young and have some early success is you buy what they call in England a pile, which means a lovely old country cottage or something. And so I bought a beautiful 15th century cottage in Sussex in the south of England, where I was actually raised. My mother is from Sussex. And so I've got a little upright piano in there, and one of the first things I did was I started banging those chords, Daisy Jane. Fly Me Back to Memphis. I had never at that time ever been to Memphis, so that shows you what you can make up. But also, Dewey and I, when we were getting started, one of the great singer-songwriters that we lost way too early was a man named Nick Drake, who was on Island with John Martin, a fantastic singer-songwriter. And Nick Drake had a song called Hazy Jane, and so I think I morphed that into Daisy Jane.
Perfect. Robert from Las Vegas has a curious one. Were both of you surprised on an agreement when Janet Jackson wanted to use one of your songs?
Actually, we have this strange connection with the Jackson family because we've had a few of our songs that ultimately ended up somewhat attached to the Jacksons. First of all, Janet did, what was the name of that song that sounded like Daisy Jane?
Janet had a lovely song called Let's Wait a While. That was a ballad produced by Jam and Lewis, their production duo, and it was unfortunately a little bit too close to Daisy Jane. And flying me back to Memphis there's something I gotta tell you. And it was settled out of court, so I can't discuss it, but I did install the Janet Jackson Memorial Swimming Pool in the backyard.
The stuff you didn't read in the book, right here.
So that was the first encounter, and we've been fans for years. Phase 2.
Someone to Call My Lover was a song she put out that incorporated the Ventura Highway lick, essentially the diddly-dee, diddly-dee, diddly, which is kind of the hook of Ventura Highway. So there was a co-write involved there. When these things they're out of our hands. They're not anything that we really pursue. They're always it's like when they use your music in commercials or films or TV or something, or someone covers them, you're kind of the last to hear about it almost. Of course, you do get to sign off it as the writers, and similar thing happened with Michael Jackson, who had written a song called "A Place with No Name," which used basically the melody and the sample of "Horse with No Name," and he wrote his own lyrics to it called "A Place with No Name." We were aware of that. We heard it. It was in the can. It never came out until after he passed. And at the time that we heard it, we thought, well, it's kind of a novelty, kind of curious, but it didn't really light us on fire or anything. But it's always flattering to have people do that kind of a thing. But it was unusual.
And there were 3 examples, involving the Jackson family. I will say one other thing, which is kind of just funny, but when the producers, by this point, Michael Jackson was using a variety of different producers, so there was a lot of stuff in the can, and the producer who built the track for his song, Place with No Name, actually sampled our master of Horse with No Name, so it was actually Dewey's real acoustic that was going through the thing. And we knew that, we heard it, and we recognized it. And when it finally was picked to come out on one of the anthologies, they came to us and they said, oh no, he went back in and replayed it, because they didn't want to pay for a license to use our master. And there's an app which you might know called Shazam. And you can hold up Shazam and it'll identify. So in the court hearing, they played the Michael Jackson master and held up Shazam, and it went right to America's Greatest Hits. And his legal team said, well, that's a hell of an app.
Forensic music.
Forensic music, yeah.
Saved by technology.
Oh, boy.
Here's one just to push your buttons. Mike from Syracuse, New York. Do you get as frustrated and as irritated as we do, double underline, / when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominations are announced?
Ooh.
I used to think the answer to this was to just put a new category.
I know this one.
Styx and REO and us and the Doobies and just call it shit from the 70s. I thought that would sort out so much.
Everybody who makes it on the 70s rock and romance cruise should be in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I think I think these winds are blowing our direction because, diminishing returns. And our dear friends finally, after all these years, Chicago,
yeah.
that have been passed over for years and years. And Doobies, believe me, hang in there. I think it's coming our way.
In your next 50 years, you'll get there, right? That's what. We're just about to wrap up here, but there's one last question which I think is fantastic, and I apologize if I didn't get to your question. Carrie Kaufman from Florida, 50 years, 100 shows per year. What keeps you going?
Well, I do have an answer to that. It has become harder and harder, as you can imagine, for kids that started at 17 going to 67 years of age. We have all traveled, I'm sure, quite a lot. To get on a plane is nowhere near as simple as it used to be. Yeah. What it takes out of you is far more draining as you put decades behind you. Mm-hmm. But in full disclosure, the rewards we get from getting on stage every night and the feedback we get, which is a nightly reminder of why we all do this, and it is our half of the bargain. All of those people that sell out these venues every night are the reason our kids went through college and stuff. Mm-hmm. So we treat it with the greatest respect. Yeah. Those shows are the reward, our give back.
Yes,
good answer.
I agree.
Great answer.
And we're so full of gratitude for this ability. We were music lovers when we were kids, and we've made our own music. We still get to be around music, play music. It's just a real thrill that we've got this. And those 50 years, we never left the road either. We've never stopped this thing. We've had our peaks and valleys, ups and downs. We lost Dan early on and have had changes. But, it's just an incredible reality that I keep marveling at. So we want to thank you all very much for supporting.
Yeah. Really. Well, I know I speak for at least half the audience here that saw you last night, and the other half, which has probably seen you at some point or another, and we'll see you here very, very soon on this cruise. When I say thank you, because the show you still put out is as good as it ever has been and as good as as is expected. So
and thank you all very much.
Jason.
Do me a favor.
Good man, Jason.
Thank you
very much.
Do me a favor, everybody. Help me thank Jerry and Dewey. As you know him, give it up for America.
Thank you.
Hi, we're Foreigner, inviting you to join us and many of our good friends on board the 70s Rock and Romance Cruise.
The 70s Rock and Romance Cruise is back and bigger than ever in 2021. Come celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Feel Good Party at Sea. Experience over 50 live performances by rock royalty, including Foreigner, Air Supply, 10cc, The Guess Who, War, B.J. Thomas, Jim Messina, The Family Stone, Melissa Manchester, Pure Prairie League, Badfinger featuring Joey Molland, Toast performing a tribute to Bread, cruise host Peter Asher, and even more surprises to be added. Relive the soundtrack of your life as these incredible superstars perform the hits you love. And every unforgettable performance is included in the cost of your trip. Departing from Miami February 27th, 2021, this 7-day voyage will sail on the beautiful Celebrity Infinity and visit the sun-soaked ports of St. Martin and St. Thomas. Go back to the days of those unforgettable live rock concerts with the bands that rocked your world and your heart. Plus, get up close and personal with these iconic artists at more than 25 celebrity-led interactive events, including Q&As and panel discussions, wine tasting, game shows, and more. Celebrate the 70s with special theme events, costume parties, and a disco dance party that will keep the boat rocking all day and all night. Visit our sales reps on board and reserve your cabin now for a deposit of just $100 per person. Plus, receive our exclusive lowest onboard rates. Don't wait. Book now to take advantage of easy payment plans and best cabin selection. The 70s Rock and Romance Cruise, sailing February 27th, 2021. Celebrate the 5th anniversary cruise and relive the era that made you feel so good. Trust us, you don't want to miss our biggest party yet.
We We got to hear the backdrop of our lives.
The great, great songs, the great memories, the happy times. It's amazing.
When you hear all the bands that are on there and just knowing that you can actually interact with them, it's a magical experience.
This is the best cruise we have ever been on. We love it.
It's definitely an opportunity for a step back in time with some great performers and great music.
Out of 5 stars, I give it a 5-star. Just been the greatest time ever.
Feel the magic, it's coming around. Come on, here we go. So unforgettable. Let's